All right, we are okay. One way, sweet. We are live. Awesome. All right, everyone. How's it going? Hope you had a great week. Back here once again, AAA here with my great friend Duff. Duff, say hello.
Hey everyone.
Hope everyone had a good week and hope we are all enjoying the weather mainly. It was pretty hot this week. Today it rained a whole lot. I don't know how the weather is down there for you, Duff, but here it was fairly on and off with rain and that kind of thing. So hopefully you're maybe dry.
Oh no, weather over here has been pretty good. Cannot complain.
I see. Well, good. And then no longer as humid.
Nope, nope. It's been really good. As I say, it's been nice. We had a couple overcast days, and then it's been sunny, so it's been a lovely summer thus far.
Oh wow, now I gotta go visit you then. Cool, cool, awesome, good to hear. Well, tonight we were gonna have a bit of a shorter show, but I wanted to bring up, which sounds a little redundant. I know everyone keeps talking about the screeching cries that President Trump has made over his Supreme Court nominee. It happened just a little bit ago, but we're still hearing all the terrible things about, oh, he's awful, he's horrible, he's gonna go and overturn this Supreme Court case and stuff, and just having the most despicable fights, and you'd think it'd be over, but of course it's still not, and people are still waging wars over what he will do. But hopefully that will end soon. I just want to make a quick mention, I guess the newest and not quote unquote newest thing that people have been talking about was he is really bad with credit on some means. He bought, I guess, a bunch of sports tickets to go to a game, and he just was in quote unquote debt. But then if you looked at the article more, you could see that he paid everything. He basically bought a bunch of tickets for his friends, and then later on they paid him back. So they were angry with him for using a credit card. That was all they got on him. So it's kind of getting a little ridiculous more and more. I mean, it's this line of ridiculousness. We keep getting farther to ridiculousness, but it's very interesting to see the levels people will go to say you didn't pick my person, so I'm going to be angry with you and stuff. The Did you hear anything about any other crazy accusations there, Duff?
No, but that's been sort of a funny one to watch from the sort of Canadian perspective, because essentially it's like we are going to complain about the most moderate pick that Trump could have made. And we're also going to use the fact that he discloses how much he makes and what he does with his credit history, as he's supposed to as a Supreme Court, to our advantage. But the thing is, it's the type of information that is publicly accessible to everyone. So it's like, okay, let's go take a look at what he's disclosed about how much he's made and how much he's spent and how much he's put aside and things like this. So the very next click you could literally see is like, okay, so from this year to this year, did he have like a massive debt or something like that? And it's like, well, no, not really. So it's just really funny because they're going for whatever they can. I imagine if he had spent the money on NFL tickets, he wouldn't have got quite as much of a backlash because, of course, the NFL is uh, a public grounds upon which to air your disputes with your government by kneeling and things like that. But baseball, not quite the same. So we can go after the fact that he likes baseball. We wouldn't be able to go after him if it turned out he liked the NBA or the NFL. So it's kind of a bit of a nothing burger, but it shows you that they're trying to get any pick on anything they possibly can. Maybe not to the benefit of the Democratic Party, because I have the feeling that most center and most right-leaning Democrats would probably be like, we actually don't mind him as a pick. He looks like he can vote for us on some issues and vote against us on some issues, but he's not a guaranteed vote for against us. So they're making a whole lot of hullabaloo over someone who's basically a vanilla candidate.
Yeah, that's true. It's getting really a little ridiculous how, like you said, the how they're trying to go in, I guess, dig from the bottom of the barrel and say, hey, this person's just awful. And we're all like, I don't think they're that terrible person. I don't know why we're doing all this blaming, shaming, and things. So I don't get why, as you said, the most moderate pick is this terrible, awful person and stuff. So it's just really sad to see how, yeah, and again, that goes back to what we said last week of, hey, we are against whomever he picks. And you're like, well, this is just, uh, I mean, on the good side, I guess you are being extremely clear about, hey, we are honestly saying we don't like whatever he does. So at least they're being, I guess, transparent in what they do. Um, But yeah, so that was terrifying. And then the which another thing that was a little terrifying, which I saw. I don't know if you watched the. I want to say it's called The Rule of the Ruler. It's the show. I don't remember the name of the show, but there was an interview that the new Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio Cortez did, and it talked. She talked about, or she tried to describe issues in Palestine and unemployment. So have you seen this interview by any chance, Duff?
No, I have not, but I've heard there's been quite a bit of fallout out of it. Because didn't she do the double speak where she spoke for like 20 minutes and then she turned around and said, "Well, I don't actually have any specific knowledge about any of these things."
I only saw a minute or two clip, and I was at work, so I didn't want to watch a 20-minute video. But basically, I don't remember the question either. It was something, the dispute between Israel and Palestine, and she basically said, "Oh yeah, it's terrible that the settlements are doing something." And the interview kind of went, "Oh really? Well, would you expand on that?" Yeah, well, they're just awful with the homes over there. And she's like, I'm not sure I understand what you mean. Can you expand more on that?" And she kind of kept going. Eventually, she said, "Oh, honestly, I'm not an expert in this field right now," which was funny because then I heard on the Shapiro show, Ben said, "Oh, this is weird because she has a degree in international economics and she can't speak to what they're doing over there like at all. She had a degree and she doesn't know the things." When that was, and again, I don't know much there, but it was just very funny to see you could easily tell there was awkward pause, and she just kind of had no idea what was going on, where to go, and kind of thing. And then the clip after that was her discussing, or the interviewer saying, "Oh, by the way, have you seen numbers? The unemployment rate is going down. This is just great." And she just said, "Oh, well, people have two jobs, so I'm not really sure about that. We're working more hours, and we're just terrible." And and I don't remember her exact quote, but the way she said it, it was very much. She obviously didn't understand how unemployment works and how basic economics, which again, she has a degree in economics, so it's just kind of funny to see all that fun stuff. But along with that interview, she did another interview, and I can't remember the interviewer either there, but I saw a video of someone asking, "Hey, how did you get to this point? How did you get voted in? What strategies did you use?" And she kind of just said, "Yeah, I hope people don't look at me up." She didn't say this word for word, but the essential point was, "I hope people don't look me up too much. We won because we swayed to one side or the other. So please vote for me. We don't look into me too much." Was the point that I understood from it. So it was very interesting to see the emptiness in her backing and that kind of stuff. But I guess I don't know. Is this? Do you think this is a good, bad thing? Is having the transparency good, or do you think that people aren't really caring as much about what you say, just how you virtue signal? If that all makes sense.
Uh, there's a couple things going on, which I would sort of point to. Is A, you have a very young, is she a congresswoman now?
I believe she's in the 14th district and whatever, and yeah, she's like 28, so she's
Yeah,
not
so you have a very
not even
young
30 yet.
congressperson, and who kind of got into the position that she's getting into because she went with a very populist sentiment, but lacks, let's say, a robust engagement with the Democratic Party's political instruments. And so she wasn't really groomed to be a candidate, right? So what you see is what you get. And because within, let's say, the Democratic Party more broadly, there are so many divisions, her side might be getting the most press, but they're also the least politically savvy. They haven't been around for very long. And so there's no one really to mentor her to what where they're going or what she wants to do. And the parallel here is you have Bernie Sanders, who says many of the same things, but at least he has a career, a career behind him, a history within the political system, and although perhaps his perspectives on things are a little bit skewed and a little bit based more in a utopian ideal of where things ought to be and not really based on the way things are, but at least he has that background, whereas this new congresswoman, of course, does not. And to a degree, you have to extend her some grace there. And you say, okay, you're a young person who has grown up in sort of a digital click age, has grown up and gone to school in an era where nobody really challenges you if you have the right perspective. And so the fact that you would be ignorant about things on an international level or even within a municipal or even state level stuff is not abnormal, but you've made yourself the poster girl of the socialist part of the Democratic Party. The problem is that you're maybe not the ideal candidate for that at this period of time, and it's going to come back to bite you.
Yeah, that's fair. So I'm guessing you would be maybe saying that she could be overwhelmed when she debates. Is that a fair point to make now, or is it too soon to tell?
Sure, absolutely. She could be overwhelmed and just out of her depth, kind of thing. Or those just might not be issues which she's interested in. The idea that every congressperson has to have specialized knowledge of anything related to the US government is a bit of a fallacy. And it's kind of built up around the fact that the people who we usually get to see on television when it comes to politicians are ones who have been groomed for the role of speaking to the media. And so they're good at saying not a lot of anything, but not actually coming across as if they don't know anything. Whereas she is lacking that training. And not to say that I agree with the degree to which she would like to reform things, but she's being done a real disservice, mostly because she's young, good looking, and of Latin extraction. None of which is a bad thing, but she hasn't been extended any like help. So, as odd as it is to say, it's like I would prefer the Democratic Party actually to do something to help her, and maybe she'll become a better candidate, a better congresswoman, and a more savvy politician in a good way than what's happening now, where she's just been thrown to the media circus, and they're kind of hoping that she gets dragged down by the dogs, kind of thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's well, and I guess the bad news there is she might not have to have very many facts when she debates, because I guess she could just virtue signal, or I guess that's the question. Do you think that she could virtue signal her way out of anything, or eventually they're gonna get to the nitty gritty and say, well, because again, that's kind of the same thing with Bernie. He said, hey, free stuff. People go great, and there were some facts behind some of the things he could have said, and people, but maybe is it fair to say that she's basically a mini Bernie, and that's how the trend will go, or do you think maybe she'll do her start a new, okay, here's the millennial version, or do her own thing, if that makes sense?
Sure. I think what you could say is she is in the same vein as Bernie Sanders, but the thing which I think a lot of people need to realize is that Bernie Sanders is only the only real Bernie Sanders and has been the only real Bernie Sanders um, for literally decades. Um, and I think part of the reason for that is he can't really actually bring forward any policy changes that he himself has brought about and say, look at all the good stuff which I've done. In the same way, this new congresswoman, she is going to suffer from the fact that there isn't actually a huge base of social democrats in the Democratic Party, and she is just one person and can't actually bring about any pass any laws or pass any bills. So I'm kind of playing the devil's advocate for her because I think she's in a unfortunate position, which she I don't think was quite aware of the demands and the scrutiny which she'd be put under. But at the same time, I think what she serves as is the template for the next generation of politicians coming up. And what we have to realize with them is they might be perhaps too idealist in their expectations of things and not policy driven enough, at least coming out of that social democratic wing of the supporters of the Democratic Party.
Yeah, it's a little bit terrifying there to see that would be as the DNC chairman Perez described, she's the future. So that's a little scary there, and to see how she did go to the college and she said some things, and some of them are true and others are crazy. So it's interesting to see our future, or their future overall and whatnot. But like we talked about
Well,
last
but
time.
with that AAA, I have a question for you.
Oh, sure.
So, are you okay, or would you be willing to support younger congressional candidates from the Republican side?
If they meet the criteria, then sure. I don't think, and it's kind of a little bit copying off of that. I don't vote for the person. I vote for the idea that they're behind. So again, that's the not to digress too much, but there was a book. I believe the book was called um leaders or either leaders eat last or start with Y, one of the two. And there was by a guy named Simon Sinek, and he gave a speech over certain leaders and positioning and stuff. And anyway, the short version of his speech was he talked about this high ranking. I want to say it was a general, a manager, some president, high ranking person in the company, and he talked about the guy. I guess described he came to a seminar to give a speech 1 year when he was this leadership position, and basically everything was done for him. And then he came here the next time and he had to do everything himself. And his point was just, I am the concessions and the privileges and all the things were not for me; they were for the position. So, as Ben says, I don't vote for someone because they look pretty or they say the right things. I want to make sure that they have the right virtues and values that I agree with and support, and will actually put what I think and into action, into a law, and whatever, and move on from them, as opposed to just saying, oh hey, I'm pro this, I'm pro that, vote for me stuff. You must back things up, and regardless of age, because I'm pretty sure in a lot of states age isn't really a factor. I want to say there were a few um, Congress people or other positions that have been fairly young individuals going for. But yeah, and I think if Miss Cortez was to go and get voted in somewhere else, and I would agree with her views, then maybe yeah, then maybe I would support her then. So it's definitely not the age or race or whomever. It's definitely the idea behind what she says. And right now she seems like a crazy person. But I guess I'll flip that back. Would you also vote for someone so young if they agreed, or do you have any specific requirements for your candidates there?
Now, I would always try and prefer vote on policy and also history. So if someone who is claiming the opposite of something suddenly starts supporting a popular view, I'd be somewhat skeptical of them, even though they might be supporting the view that I wish to be taken. But I think that also plays into the next generation of voters as well. So one of the things that, sorry, some of the criteria they want to vote on are people who are, let's say, within their age bracket, right? Who have a shared understanding of the digital world and how powerful social media is for organizing things. And perhaps more of an ear for grievance culture and also for virtue signaling. So just as you could say that you would look at certain policies and say, this is good, I'll vote for them based off of those policies, for an up and coming demographic, Cortez is doing exactly the same things, as scary as that might sound. It's just that a lot of her positions are not directly political, but rather bringing apolitical stances into the political sphere. And that's what can be so scary about what she's advocating for is she wants to legislate purely on feelings. And feelings definitely have a place in the legislation process, but they should not trump due process, right? So if something is supported by public feeling, and it turns out that it's within the ethic of the country and it's supported by the cultural practices of that country, and it changes the law to make something better, that's great. But if you say, I think people feel this, we need to change the law because they feel that, without going through the due process, that's where the real danger sort of stems from. But as I said earlier, I think it's interesting because what Cortez represents is a generation of people's or a demographic of people's thoughts on issues important to them, but they're not strictly political and they're not necessarily economically set in the same way as you or potentially I would want them to be when we're thinking of points that are important to us.
That's fair. Well, let me amend my statement. I think I jumped the gun a bit when I said this. I think that uh I guess I should rephrase when I say I want them to say what I want to hear. And history definitely counts. So I guess maybe I would if I were to if someone said, okay, I don't know, I'm pro gun, I go, okay, cool, I might lean towards listening to you at least, or give you the time of day more often. But then I would also want them to make coaching arguments, back it up, and go through and say, okay, well, you're gonna go before the Second Amendment. What will you do to actually, put this into legislation? Why are you for it, against it? I want to know all those arguments there too. So I guess I don't want to say, okay, they're pro gun, pro-life, all these things that I agree with, I would want to have the discussion over, okay, what is your foundation? What is your reasoning behind all of these things? Do you see a reasonable, realistic way to get from, okay, I want people to have XYZ to actually implementing? Do you understand when you change something or legislate what you're affecting and how it's not a, if we do this thing right here, it's going to just change things. I mean, do you understand all of the ripple affecting you're going to make once set of laws put into place? So I would go a little deeper there, um, to that regard. I don't want to just throw out, okay, hey, they like me and stuff. So, and I guess the good news maybe is the fact of the more you have a candidate who says, oh, here's what I want to do and say it right, the more often you see that come out there, like, and we're saying it for with her, it's very easy to say, okay, by pressing just a little bit, it's not it's not going to happen. They don't have a lot of backing behind them, as opposed to the more well-seasoned senators and Congress people who have the, okay, well, here we're going to do these things right now, and they'll get called out and they go, yeah, well, I think this is the reason behind blah blah blah. So I would want to have more detail behind that, and that kind of thing. But and I guess that goes back to the question of, okay, so let's say you have a candidate who is saying the things you want them to say, and maybe has a few years, on them to legislate whatever else. What would you use to litmus test to say, okay, this person says what I want to hear, have a few years, what's the next step to make sure that they are actually backing up and going to be a model candidate and actually implement potential legislation that you would agree with? How would you, I guess, further test them, if that makes sense?
Well, I think there's a certain limitation to how far you can test them until they've actually been in the office and you see what they try and advocate for. So, leading up when they're running, if they're not the incumbent, you want to know what their plans are, what their stances are, whether or not they're willing to work, let's say, across party lines or even across distinctions within the party to try and achieve outcomes, and what they would be willing to give up in order to do that. So, all those things are things which you can do, but until they've actually been in office, there's kind of a unknown commodity about them. And then you have to think about the history once they've been in office of what their party's been doing. So somebody might be elected a bunch of times and always vote for what you want them to vote, and nothing which they vote for ever gets passed. But within the breakdown of the parliamentary system, who's in power, their party never actually had direct power over anything. So it's like you have one set of variables for candidates who are unknown, and one set of variables for candidates who have more history, and then let's say a third set of variables for candidates who have a history, and are now proposing things which would go against what they proposed in the past. So you want to maintain skepticism throughout, but there's definitely, let's say, no perfect amount of factors which you could try to hold them to try and get an ideal candidate kind of thing.
That's fair. I think I mean, that makes sense. And there's no uh can you think of any way to make a more regulated, or not, maybe not regulated is a bad word, but a better system in place to say, okay, candidate X wants to go and implement this, and we can test them before they get into office by this direction, or so it's there's no way around the let's see what happens. It has to just be the time will tell kind of argument.
Um, I would hesitate to try and micromanage uh, your politicians to that degree, um, simply because even though they're elected to serve as your representative or you voted for them, they're not short order cooks. And what you just asked them to be is more explicit about their reasoning and the process to the degree which they can be. And so it's like, okay, so this bill here, which is before us, this side's arguing this side's arguing this, and we could lean this way or we could lean that way, um, and actually talk to you about it. So, in today's society, they could literally have a YouTube channel, right? And just talk about things which they're doing maybe once a week, kind of thing. But the idea that you're going to regiment them to exactly what you want them to do is assuming that you can control so many different variables. Like within most political structures as well, there's someone called the party whip. And the party whip's job is to go around and make sure that everyone in the party, or at least enough of the party members, are going to vote the way the party wants, even if that particular candidate doesn't want to vote that way. Um, and that's actually an important thing to do in order to maintain sort of like a political structure, because otherwise everyone's fractured all the time, and you might never get anything done.
Interesting. That's well, and so this I guess, is it fair to say that the best way to make sure that the candidate you have is actually doing what they wanted to? I guess the only way to get there is to just try to have things more transparent, or do you think that things are fairly ish transparent now, or it'd be hard to make them any more transparent, if that makes sense?
Um, I would say it's more. Uh, you have to take a look. You have to be willing to put in time to take a look at how they voted on previous topics, and whether they declared who they voted for, or what position they backed. But also just asking them to talk through their reasoning process, even though that in itself is a powder keg, because of course people are going to try and rip them apart for how they explain their reasoning. A good example of this would be the committee that was looking at Judge Gorsuch when he was nominated, right? And probably the same thing which will happen for Kavanaugh. But the fact that there is a climate which prevents people from trying to, politicians particularly, from trying to explain the processes which they go through and what they're doing in the negotiation and what they see as a good negotiation, which might be for something which isn't good right now, but we're going to trade it for favors in the future and actually expect those favors to be held. That would be really cool. But it's not, we really shouldn't be paving the way for saying, we want you to vote expressly this way, and we're going to have an internet straw poll on how you're going to vote all the time, because that sort of defeats the fact that politicians, as much as they are political leaders, are by and large negotiators within a larger system of ways of doing things that are beyond their control.
Hmm. Well, that's fair enough. I think that that's good to have. Well, I mean, and I don't know, maybe an idea to make their stances better is to have the, because I mean, that's kind of the same thing with all the podcasts that nowadays are important. Everything else, maybe a better solution is to start with saying, here is the candidate there for these things, and just have like an hour to interview with them and say, hey, here's what you believe and why, and just use the transparency to have an interview and say, you have 15 minutes in this topic. Can you please describe that you believe in this, what the history behind this is, how you believe it should be done, all those fun things, and just really delve into, all of their points before, okay, hey, this is a human right, or I don't like these people, or whatever else kind of deal, which, I mean, I think is definitely possible to do. So, I mean, I don't know, just throwing out an idea of how things can be a bit more transparent. And then, of course, you said we have to see what they vote for, and kind of deal. I'm guessing it's similar for Canada and U.S. Is that how? And I don't know if you know that. How did you find out about I guess the whip or whatever position you talked about to have the candidate vote wrongly? Is that what you were referring to with the position there?
No, so party whips have a long history within the British model of of parliaments, and even in the states, you guys have them too. And it's essentially uh, in the states you have them for different caucuses within the Congress. So it's like the Tea Party would have the equivalent of a party whip, and his job is to go around and say, "Hey, this is what we need you to vote as, because we want this bill to go through this way, whether it's for or against." In the same way, if you have a majority government, it really doesn't help you if within your party it fractures and people start voting against your party, because suddenly you no longer have that majority. So the party whip's job is to go around and say, hey, you need to vote this way, and this many of you need to be here for this vote so we can ensure that our thing will pass and it won't get interfered with by other parties, because that could possibly happen. Imagine you don't have anyone show up for a vote because everyone thinks, oh, it's done, and the opposition party stacks the House, and they all vote together, and suddenly you're kind of screwed because it's passed through. So there's a certain amount of gamesmanship to any congressional system, and party whips' jobs are to ensure that that's gamesmanship doesn't extend to the fact that not enough people are showing up to vote on important issues.
Interesting. Yeah, it's kind of sad how many people don't. I mean, I didn't know that. I've heard of the whip position before. I didn't know that was their job, but I guess that's more of an educational thing to probably hand down. Would you say that the I know in America we don't know a lot. I think even our I want to say the millennials, not necessarily myself included, but several of the kids in school nowadays probably couldn't name our three branches of government and what they do and why they do it and all that kind of fun stuff. Just curious, do you think that the Canadians, whatever age or high school age, whatever, would be able to describe what you just said, or does everyone pretty much not? Is that pretty much a mysterious position to be held in Canada?
Um, Basically, if they're taking social studies 10 or 11, they could probably tell you. If they are in the public sphere somehow, they could probably tell you. But by and large, that type of information isn't particularly relevant to people on their day-to-day lives, right? They know that there is a court system. They know that there's a federal system. They know that there is a provincial system. But to be able to say, well, there is the Senate, the House of Commons, and the judiciary, most people wouldn't be able to tell you, or a large portion of people wouldn't be able to tell you that, just because it's not particularly relevant to what they do. But they would be able to tell you that they would like the government to make changes. And understanding that premise and the fact that your vote might count for something is, I would say, more important to some degree than having specific knowledge about the three branches of government, unless you're trying to make a very particular point.
Sure. Well, I think that there is the right the whip position might not be the most relevant to you, but there's definitely the people should know about our founding documents, our founding fathers, all that kind of fun stuff, and for both sides. And so it's and again, once you don't know the knowledge, you don't have the knowledge about those things, you have a breakdown, and people kind of go, oh well, government's for this. And you're like, well, no, it's not. No one reads the documents the history to remember why things happened the way they did and stuff. So it's chaotic and whatever else. But no, I think that was an interesting point you made about the weapon kind of thing. But that's it seems like we're getting into very very scary times and sketchy area. But I'm hopeful for the future, and I think that as we discussed, if it's easy for enough for kind of a no name person to get into Congress and start making waves, and hopefully someone else can be the counteractive person and kind of deal. But I guess I
Well,
guess we shall see how that all works out. So
I,
what were you
I
saying there,
think
Duff?
I think more so. As odd as it might sound, I think Cortes being elected is actually a sign of the democratic system in the United States working properly, because you do want people who might not have a history as a politician to have the same opportunity to get into government and be able to speak on their electorate's behalf, because they embody that electorate better. But I think the problem more so is that you have someone who's espousing very idealistic and pie in the sky perspectives on things with no real knowledge of what it is that they want to change in a tangible way. Whereas if you had somebody, even if they're from a party which you might not agree with, who is young and they say, look, we want to change this about how the law works based off of these principles. And I went and read some books on this, and it's important to know. We want people to be, our government to be more reflective of the time and age in which we live, because there's a lot of things which are outdated and could be done better, and actually have some specific examples. What's killing Cortes, um, other than being a socialist, is that she can't point to those things, so she becomes a bit of a redundant candidate or a redundant politician, because even though she is the embodiment of some really cool things, the idea that anyone can get in, provided you're of the age of maturity kind of thing, and that you can run on a popular platform and not be the wealthiest person in the world, that's also a good thing. So it's one of those interesting things where it's like, if you just looked at what she managed to achieve being her age and running on her platform, that's actually a really cool thing, because it shows that the United States is not an oligarchy. it's not simply ruled by people who know other people who are part of the same social class. And broadly speaking, that's amazing, and that needs to be maintained. Your politicians cannot be an elite class unto themselves, otherwise you end up with what happens in Britain, where your politicians are so out of touch with everyday people that you have a conservative government that's crumbling on itself because it won the position it wanted to do and had no idea what it wanted to do. Sorry, no idea what to do with it because they just want to hobnob with other elites as opposed to actually dealing with the problems that British people are facing. So yeah, but what are your thoughts on that there, AAA?
Well, no, and okay, so let me rephrase. I think it is to your point. It's very good that she was able to get elected in the way that she did. Her ideas scare me, but I'm glad that she was able to, round up her friends and get voted in. So I guess my silver lining, in my opinion, is okay. Well, if she can do that, then it shouldn't be hard for someone on the views I do agree with does do a similar technique and does also get elected into an office and says, hey, I did the same thing. I have these different ideas, and those two debates. So yes, I think it is good that she has gotten through, and like you said, didn't need the people or the money and all that fun stuff, and was being able to elect it in. And so if she can do it, then other people that I might agree with can follow the same steps and to get in there. So yeah, I think it's better to have that opening, and hopefully this will encourage more. I mean, right now I think the biggest thing we need to do to help out the government and our overall, I think we just need to have more people that are well our age and kind of. I mean, that was, I don't know if you saw that, but that was one of the scary parts when Mark Zuckerberg went to the Congress and talked about all the collusion and all those things about the election and stuff. It was scary to see how the Congress and the senators didn't know a lot about Facebook or how the internet worked and all those fun things. And you're thinking to yourself, well, they're here and they're making laws about things that they really don't get. So I do hope that we have more uh, um, diversity. Well, no, that's not even the right word. More. I guess not just diversity, but more of a mixed age group, more mixed generations, and not have this whole okay, well, back in my day, this is how things went. We need to have more open minded people and then more people who understand how things are nowadays to be able to change quickly and go, okay, hey, I've used these products or I understand how these trends are going, and I can't just say, okay, if I do this law, things will get better. So I mean, that's the argument with term limits, but it seems as though if you had that in, you wouldn't have this, as you just put it, they're so far away from the base that they just say the right thing and they get in. We need to make sure that people, top and bottom, all understand each other, and maybe that is the better test to have, and I guess it is working now. But would you agree, Duff, to have more people of different uh, backgrounds and experience levels and that kind of thing would be better to help out?
Yeah, I think it would be neat, and I think it will be neat to watch over the next, say, 20 years, in terms of the rollover of types of people who want to become politicians and just some of the platforms they run on. So it could be really cool. It could be very scary. But if you actually have more people being involved, at least your government becomes more representational of your population as a whole.
Yeah, I think that would be the better goal. Um, yeah, so I think and then overall, like I said, we I hope that there are more people that follow in her footsteps, both people that I agree, disagree with, and yeah, I'm glad that this happened, and let's hope that things keep happening there. But I think yeah, that's a good positive note to end on. We wanna make sure that this is a good proof that system is working, and there is not necessarily a special way to get in and change laws and legislation to make our lives better. So let's hope that this keeps going and that kind of thing. But anyway, guys, that is probably about all the time we've got left there. Duff, any final words from you, or think is that have we covered everything from from her point of view?
Uh, Vive la France! They won the World Cup. That was quite the game.
Oh, cool. I've not actually seen a lot of that yet, but yeah, that is go France, and I guess so. I take it that is over for the next 2 or so years then, or whatever.
Four,
4. Okay.
4 years. Yeah.
Gotcha. Cool. Yes. Well, the World Cup and all that fun stuff, guys. Go YouTube that, and we will see you here next week or whenever. Hopefully, very very soon. All right. Well, Duff, say goodbye.
Have a good week, everybody.
All right, everyone. Good to see you, and we will talk to you soon. Thank you so much.